When hope was almost gone, a dog answered. Every refugee story begins with loss. But this one almost ended in silence. A father, a mother, a daughter, and a young boy, desperate enough to hide inside a rusted container bound for America. For days, they lived in total darkness. Hunger gnawed, air thinned, and their small knocks faded against the roar of the sea. They were slipping away, unseen, unheard. Until a German shepherd named Rex stopped in his tracks. Something in the steel called to him, something no human could hear. He barked, he clawed, he demanded the world listen. And because of him, doors opened, light flooded in, breath returned. This is not just a rescue. It is proof of the unbreakable bond between humans and the dogs who refuse to forget them. By late afternoon, the town had learned how to hold its breath. Dust lay where laughter used to be. Market stalls, once bright with oranges and spices, stood open-mouthed and empty, their awnings torn like old bandages. Brick walls carried their own constellation, small dark moons where bullets had kissed and kept going. The wind moved without hurry, lifting scraps of newspaper and setting them down again, as if to say, "Nothing here belongs for long." Amira walked beside her brother with the careful steps of someone afraid to wake a sleeping house. 14 had come too fast. It sat on her shoulders like an oversized coat she hadn't grown into yet. Karim, 9, all knees and quick eyes, watched the edges of things. The slot where the grocer's sign used to hang, the cracked face of the clock above the clinic, the thin thread of smoke twisting from a chimney that should have been cold by now. He was memorizing without knowing why. Their mother held a photo album wrapped in a scrap of blue cloth. She did not look down at it, but her hand stayed there, palm flat, as if a little pressure could keep the past from sliding away. Their father walked a pace ahead, one hand behind his back, the other rubbing the edge of his sleeve between forefinger and thumb, a habit he had when he was trying not to show fear. They passed the corner where pomegranates had been stacked each autumn. The wooden crates were still there, blackened by a fire no one claimed. Down the alley, a door had been kicked in and left to hang open, a tongue of splintered wood lolling from its hinge. Somewhere a metal shutter clanged. Somewhere a dog barked once, and then decided against it. When the road narrowed and the houses leaned toward one another, as if to share a secret, the father slowed. He waited for the children, then bent so his mouth was close to their ears. His voice was a thread pulled tight. "We leave tonight." Neither child answered. No one asked where or how. The words didn't need company. Their mother's hand found the father's sleeve and stayed there, and together they stood for a moment in the middle of that hard-used street, caught in a pocket of stillness. Later, Amira would remember the color of the light just then, a worn gold pooling along the curb, small enough to cup in your hands if you tried. She would remember how even the dust seemed to listen. They moved on. The old cafe, a triangle of chairs stacked upside down. The barber's shop, mirrors broken into thin, bright rivers. A bicycle with a bent wheel leaned against a wall, where boys used to argue about football, and girls walked home in twos. The city they knew wore its ruin plainly, and yet beneath it, a shape remained, as if the skeleton of their lives had refused to collapse. At the archway that led to their block, the father touched the stone, a habit from before, just a tap of knuckles, a greeting. This time the sound was dull. This time it didn't echo. By evening the power failed and the house found its older self. Candles were set down where light was needed most. A saucer on the table, a jar near the water basin, one stub resting on a chipped saucer beside the window to keep the shadows honest. The air smelled of wax and cumin, and a little dust burned warm. They sat close. The album lay on the table, the blue cloth folded back like a blanket. A photograph at the edge showed 2 children in clean shirts and a woman with hair unpinned, all 3 squinting into the sun as if life had asked them to look it straight in the eye. No one reached for it. No one turned a page. The father spoke first, his hand flat upon the wood as if steadying a map. "There is a man," he said, and stopped, not from doubt, but to choose the right shutter for the window he was about to open. "A smuggler. He has arranged passage. A ship bound for America." Karim's head came up. Amira kept her eyes on the candle flame. It bent when she breathed and straightened again. "It is not how we hoped to leave," the mother said softly. There was apology in her voice, but also the steel of a woman who has already lifted more than her share. "It is not how any family should travel, but it is the way." "Inside a container," the father added. "We will be hidden. It will be difficult." The silence that followed was full of things no one wanted to name. The word dead, the word caught, the word never. A car outside coughed and moved on. Somewhere a baby cried the way babies do when the room itself has been frightened. Amira shook her head. It was a small movement, but it carried the weight of a door closing. "Not tonight," she said. "Not with grandmother still." She swallowed, and the rest of the sentence buckled under the weight of its own grief. Her grandmother's grave lay 3 streets over behind the low wall of the old cemetery. White stones leaned like tired shoulders. Amira had left a pressed flower there last spring and told no one. "Habibti," her mother said, and stopped because sometimes affection and argument wear the same name. The father's hand left the table and hovered in the air before finding Amira's shoulder. He did not squeeze. He did not force the point. He only rested his palm there, a weight and a warmth. "Freedom is the only inheritance I can give you now," he said, and it sounded less like a promise than a confession. "If we stay, your life will be measured by other men's tempers. If we go, it will be measured by your own breath." Karim looked from one face to the other. He had learned to count without numbers. The long silence that meant danger, the quick glance that meant hide, the breath held and let out slowly, that meant wait. "Will there be parks?" he asked at last, not to be foolish, but because a boy needs something he can picture. "An ice cream." "You said once." "I did," the father said, and this time his hand squeezed. "I did say that." The mother drew the album closer and pressed the cloth across it again, as if tucking someone in. "We go," she said. "We're going tonight." The candles burned lower. A moth circled and touched the flame and fell, and Amira reached to brush it away, gentle, as if it were still alive. "If we go," she said, "we will take her with us." She didn't have to say who. She didn't have to ask how. The father nodded, and in that nod there was grief and gratitude, and something like relief. The way a man feels when the worst choice finally becomes the only one. Dusk arrived the way it always had here, slow as a decision, soft at the edges. They walked a long way to keep from being seen, the album wrapped and held beneath the mother's arm, Karim's hand in his father's, Amira lagging a step as if distance could slow the clock. In the alley, laundry hung forgotten, shirts and sheets hardened by dust, the rope sagging like an old back. Their old door stuck the way it always had. The father shouldered it carefully, and it gave with a sound like a cracked sigh. Inside, the house waited with the peculiar patience of rooms left behind. The rug still bore the dark oval where the table stood last winter. A nail in the wall kept its little posture, though the picture it had held was long gone. On the sill, a faint line marked the height of two children in different years. Amira, 10. Karim, 6. The pencil had faded, but it was there. Proof that time once moved in the right direction. Karim broke from his father and went to the shelf where small things waited. A chipped soldier, a marble with a fog of white at its center, a car with one door missing. He lifted the car and kept it in his palm, the way boys do when they have found a talisman, something to firm up the ground under their feet. He did not announce it, did not ask. He slipped it into his pocket with a look that said he understood the rules had changed and that some stealing is not a sin. Amira went to the bedroom and opened the tin box beneath the cot. Inside lay a single flower pressed last spring between two grocery receipts. She had chosen it in a day when the world had let down its shoulders for an hour, yellow with a thumbprint of brown at the heart, edges lit as if the sun had a private conversation with the petals. She lifted it with 2 fingers and lay it against her palm. It had kept its shape. Somehow, that mattered. Her mother stood in the doorway and watched her daughter's careful hands. She didn't speak. She only set her own hand on the doorframe. This frame, this grain of wood they had sanded together years ago, and left it there long enough to learn it again. In the kitchen, the father opened the cupboard that had held their tea. He picked up the dented kettle, turned it once, and set it back down. Then he crossed to the wall and rested his forehead against the cool plaster. A man can be brave for a long time and still need a place to lean. They moved through the rooms and said goodbye the way poor people learn to, without the luxury of ceremony. When everything that could be touched had been touched. When the window had been opened and shut once more, just to feel the latch catch. The mother reached for the album, and the father for the door. On the threshold, Amira paused. The street had taken on the color of old coins. In the distance, a siren rose and sank again, uninterested. She slipped the pressed flower into the copy of Karim's school reader she carried, its pages thinned by too many hands. Because she could not take the grave with her, she took the one tender thing that still held the shape of her grandmother's voice. Child, be kind to your breath. Don't look back, the father said, not unkindly. His voice was low and steady, like a bridge built from wood that had already survived a storm. He pulled the door until the latch found its place, and the house went dark behind them. They walked. The street narrowed, then opened. Somewhere a generator coughed into life. Somewhere someone laughed, and it sounded like a mistake. The air cooled and carried the smell of diesel from the port. The city's spine bent toward the water as if drawn by a magnet. At the corner, Karim reached up without asking and found his mother's hand. She squeezed once, a message they all understood. Here, together, still moving. Ahead, the father turned his collar up and checked the shadows for the man he had promised to meet. Amira let her fingers graze the book where the pressed flower lay between pages, breathing as if each inhale was something she could carry and give back later, in a place where the nights were quieter. They did not look back. And the last light of the day sat briefly on the roof tiles like a blessing too small to argue with. Then it slid away, and the family entered the bruise-colored evening, walking toward a harbor where steel and salt would soon decide their future. The harbor lay restless under the pull of midnight, its waters black as oil and broken only by the occasional sweep of light across the waves. Cranes loomed overhead like skeletons of forgotten giants, their arms stretched against the faint glow of a clouded moon. The smell of salt, rust, and diesel hung heavy in the air, clinging to every breath. Amira clutched her brother's hand so tightly that his knuckles pressed white against the darkness. Karim, 9 years old, didn't protest. He only pressed back, as if the small pressure was enough to anchor him in a world that felt on the verge of slipping apart. Their mother walked beside them, her eyes darting between shadows, one hand fixed around the bundle that held the photo album, the other occasionally reaching back to brush the children's shoulders, as if to reassure herself they were still there. Their father moved with longer strides, tense and purposeful, following the figure ahead, a man they only knew by a whispered name, the smuggler. His jacket was patched with grease stains, his face hidden beneath a wool cap pulled low. He walked with the caution of someone who knew exactly where danger waited, weaving them through the labyrinth of shipping containers stacked high, each one a monolith of rust and secrecy. From somewhere across the yard, the sharp beam of a soldier's flashlight cut through the dark. The family froze. Karim's breath caught like a hiccup, and he buried his face against his mother's coat. The smuggler didn't turn, didn't gesture. He simply lowered himself into the shadow of a container, his body sinking into the blackness until he almost vanished. The family followed, hearts pounding loud enough they were sure someone would hear. The beam swept over a puddle, glinting against oil-slick water, then moved on. Boots clattered on steel catwalks, voices called out in clipped tones. The metallic clink of rifles shifting echoed faintly. The smuggler waited, counting in silence. 1, 2, 3. Then he lifted his hand and motioned forward. They slipped deeper into the maze, shoes soundless against the damp concrete. Each turn seemed to narrow the world, the walls of containers pressing closer, painted in streaks of red and green and rust, like the bruises of forgotten voyages. Somewhere in the distance a horn wailed, long and mournful, a sound that made Karim shiver, as though the sea itself had cried out. At last, they reached a container that stood apart, tucked into a pocket of shadows where the light didn't reach. Its doors sagged on their hinges, streaked with corrosion, as if it had been left to rot. The smuggler stopped, pressing his palm against the steel with the familiarity of someone who had done this many times before. He turned to them, his eyes small beneath the cap, his voice a gravel whisper. Inside. Now. No sound. No light. The father nodded quickly, though his throat moved as if swallowing stones. He ushered his wife forward. The mother bent down to Karim's height, brushing her fingers against his cheek. "We are together," she murmured, the words a thread meant to bind the moment. Then she guided him toward the yawning black of the container. Amira hesitated. The sight of the open doors made her chest tighten. It looked less like shelter and more like a mouth waiting to close. The smell that poured out was a mixture of rust, stale air, and damp wood. Her feet rooted to the ground for a heartbeat too long. Her father's hand came gently to her shoulder, not pushing, just steady. "Courage, Habibti," he whispered. "Just a few nights." She nodded, though her throat burned. Together, they climbed inside. The space swallowed them instantly, shadows crowding against their faces. The floor was cold steel, rough beneath their shoes. The smuggler stepped back, scanning the yard one final time. That was when a new beam of light swung closer. Soldiers again, 2 of them, walking the perimeter, their rifles slung low. One laughed at something the other said, the sound sharp and out of place in the heavy stillness. The smuggler stiffened, his hand hovering near the door. The family huddled inside, holding their breaths. Karim pressed against Amira's side, his tiny fingers curling around hers. She could feel the rapid flutter of his pulse through his skin. Their mother pulled both children against her chest, rocking them with almost imperceptible motions. The soldiers passed. Their light swept briefly across the row of containers opposite, revealing streaks of graffiti and the glint of broken locks, before vanishing again. Their footsteps faded into the hum of the harbor. The smuggler exhaled, his breath visible in the cold night air. He pulled the doors together with a sharp groan of metal on metal. The sound tore through the stillness like a cry. For a brief second, Amira thought the soldiers would come running back, but no footsteps followed. The last sliver of moonlight narrowed, then disappeared as the doors sealed shut. The clang of the lock dropping into place echoed like a hammer in their chests. Darkness rushed in fast and complete, so thick it felt alive. Amira blinked, but the world did not change. Her eyes could find nothing to hold on to. Inside, the air was heavier, staler, pressing against their lungs. Karim whimpered softly, the sound muffled against his mother's sleeve. "Hush," she whispered, her hand stroking his hair. But her own voice trembled as if the word itself had cracked. The father moved his hand along the wall, finding nothing but cold steel. He sat close to his family, his body curved protectively. "It is only for a short time," he murmured, though no one asked the question. Just a short time, and then he stopped. The sentence dangled unfinished, suspended in the dark. Somewhere outside, chains rattled. The deep engine of the ship began to stir, a low growl that vibrated through the walls. The container shuddered, and with it, the small bodies inside. The world had shifted, and there was no turning back. At that moment, as the steel walls hummed with the promise of departure, Amira closed her eyes and pressed the pressed flower in her pocket between her fingers. She imagined her grandmother's voice, soft as a lullaby. "Child, be kind to your breath." She inhaled carefully, exhaled slowly, and listened to the rhythm of her family's breathing. Beyond the container, soldiers kept watch. The smuggler disappeared into the shadows, and the sea prepared to carry them toward a future none of them could yet imagine. But within the iron coffin, one truth pressed heavier than the rest. They had stepped into the darkness together, and the door had closed. The first minutes inside the container felt like hours. Time was no longer measured by clocks or stars, only by the weight of the air pressing against their lungs. Darkness thickened around them, until it was more than the absence of light. It became something with edges, something that touched their skin and whispered against their ears. Amira sat with her back to the cold steel wall, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them. The metal chilled through her dress, but she didn't move. Her heart thudded so loudly, she thought the walls must hear it. The silence was unbearable, yet the thought of breaking it felt dangerous, like stepping onto a frozen river and hearing it crack beneath your feet. Her mother shifted, arranging the photo album in her lap as though it were a fragile child. Karim leaned against her side, small and trembling, his cheek pressed to the curve of her arm. He whispered her name once, testing the sound against the dark. She smoothed his hair in answer, her hand trembling slightly. The father crouched near the doors, running his fingers along the ridges where the steel met, as if looking for cracks of air. His profile was only guessed at, an outline darker than the dark. His breathing was controlled, but the way he pressed his lips together betrayed the fear that pooled in his chest. Amira closed her eyes, though it made no difference. The blackness behind her lids was the same as the one surrounding her. To keep panic from swallowing her, she began to count her breaths. 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out. The rhythm steadied her, gave her a fragile kind of order in a world stripped of it. She imagined each number was a step across a bridge, and if she kept counting, she might reach the other side. Beside her, Karim's voice rose in a small whisper, almost conspiratorial, as though the dark might lean in to listen. "When we get to America," he murmured, "I'm going to eat ice cream every day." His words trembled, but his imagination painted colors where none existed. Chocolate first, then vanilla, then maybe strawberry. Amira opened her eyes to the same void, but she clung to the sound of his voice. "Every day?" she asked softly, letting her tone carry a faint smile she didn't feel. "Yes," Karim said firmly, his whisper almost a vow. "And I'll go to a park, with swings, and grass that doesn't have broken glass in it." Their mother's breath shivered. She pulled him closer, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "Yes, Habibi. There will be grass. There will be swings. You'll run until your legs are tired. And I'll bring you flowers, Mama," Karim added, the words muffled against her sleeve. "Every day, I'll bring you flowers." The promise was so earnest that even in the blackness, Amira felt her throat tighten. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to picture herself sitting on that green grass, laughing, sunlight warming her skin. But all she could feel was the bite of rust against her fingers where she clutched the wall. The ship groaned as it shifted, the sound rolling through the container like thunder caught in a cave. The floor beneath them trembled. A chain rattled somewhere outside, then stilled. The smell of salt water seeped through, mixed with oil and iron, thick and sharp. Amira returned to her counting. 16 in, 16 out. She whispered the numbers in her head, lips barely moving. Sometimes she lost track and had to begin again. Each time she restarted, she imagined herself laying a stone on a path that stretched toward a horizon she couldn't yet see. Her father moved closer, sitting down across from her. She sensed his eyes, though she couldn't see them. "Strong, Amira?" he asked quietly. Her throat tightened, but she nodded, knowing he couldn't see that either. "Strong," she said aloud, her voice steadier than she expected. He reached out until his hand found hers in the dark. His grip was warm, steady, anchoring. "Good. You will carry your brother when he cannot carry himself. You will carry your mother when she cannot walk. And one day, you will tell this story to your own children. They must know we did not leave nothing behind. We left with hope." Her eyes burned, though there was nothing to look at. She squeezed his hand once, fiercely, as if to seal the words in her chest. Karim, half asleep against their mother's arm, whispered again, his voice drifting like a child's dream. "Will America smell different?" Amira swallowed hard. "Yes," she said. "It will smell like fresh bread and the sea, but kinder than here, and maybe ice cream too." He smiled faintly, his breathing evening out, the sound small and fragile in the suffocating dark. The hours stretched, marked only by the creaks of the ship and the slow exhaustion of their bodies. The blackness remained unbroken. No window, no sliver of moon. Only each other's breathing to remind them they were not alone. When Karim finally drifted into sleep, his small chest rising and falling against his mother's side, Amira kept counting breaths, not for herself anymore, but for all of them. 32, 33, 34. Each number a promise she clung to, that as long as she could count, they were still alive. And outside, the sea moved with its endless patience, carrying the container and its hidden cargo farther from the land they had left, and closer, though none of them could yet believe it, to the fragile dream of freedom. The ship lurched, and with it, the world tilted. Amira's shoulder struck the steel wall, sending a dull vibration through her bones. The sound that followed was worse, the groan of ancient metal, as if the container itself were protesting its burden. Every movement of the vessel carried into the hollow space, magnified until it felt like they were inside the chest of some great beast whose ribs strained and cracked under unseen weight. Karim stirred beside her, half-woken, his breath shallow. He whispered her name, the syllables barely a tremor in the dark. She hushed him with a hand against his arm, her own voice caught between fear and comfort. Above them, somewhere far beyond the rust and rivets, the ship creaked like old wood pressed against iron. A heavy chain rattled, then fell silent. Then came the sound of water, an irregular drip that landed on steel with cruel precision. Each drop echoed, sharp as a nail striking metal, and with every impact, Amira felt the container grow colder, as if the sea were already pressing in. She tried to tell herself it was nothing. A leak from condensation, perhaps. But her imagination betrayed her, painting images of water seeping through cracks, rising inch by inch until it swallowed them whole. The air was damp. She could taste the salt on her lips, though she hadn't spoken in minutes. She counted breaths again, but the rhythm faltered when another sound crept into the silence. Softer this time, too close to ignore. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Scratch. Amira stiffened. It was faint, yet unmistakable. Something alive shared the darkness with them. She turned her head quickly, but of course there was nothing to see, only black walls pressing close. Her hand found Karim's and clutched hard, her fingers cold against his skin. He flinched awake, startled by her grip. "What?" His voice was hushed, brittle. "Quiet," she whispered back. Her ears strained. The sound returned, claws or teeth dragging against metal. A shuffle, a squeak, then silence, which was somehow worse. Karim's hand trembled in hers. "Rats," he guessed, his small body curling tighter against her side. She didn't answer. Naming it made it too real. Instead, she pressed her lips together and pulled him closer. Their mother stirred at the faint exchange, opening her eyes, though they couldn't be seen. "What is it?" she asked softly, her voice cracked with exhaustion. "Nothing," Amira lied quickly. "Just the ship." But then it came again, scratching, closer this time, quick and frantic, then gone. The mother's silence told Amira she had heard it too. Her father moved, shifting across the floor until his hand touched the wall. He rapped against it sharply, 3 short knocks, his way of warning whatever skittered in the dark. The sound echoed through the hollow chamber, sending vibrations that hummed in their teeth. For a while the scratching stopped, but Amira could not let go of the thought. If rats could get in, then so could water. If water could get in, then so could death. The night dragged on with the rhythm of fear. Every creak of the hull, every splash outside, every shuffle in the corners grew louder in the stillness. Karim, too restless to sleep, whispered again, his words stumbling between dread and longing. "Amira, when we get there, will there be no rats?" His voice was small, hopeful, and it broke something inside her. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering fiercely, "No rats, only grass, only light." The promise felt heavy in her mouth, but she gave it anyway, because a brother deserved to dream of better things, even inside an iron coffin. The ship groaned again, and the container shuddered. Water dripped steadily, faster now, forming tiny rivulets that ran across the floor. Karim's bare toes curled away from the damp. The smell of rust deepened, metallic and bitter. The mother rocked slowly, humming under her breath, though the tune cracked with fatigue. It was an old lullaby, one Amira remembered from nights when the world was still gentle. The melody wrapped itself around the children, not enough to erase the fear, but enough to soften its teeth. Amira closed her eyes, clinging to her brother's warmth, and tried to imagine the park he spoke of earlier. She pictured green fields, sunlight spilling like honey, children laughing without glancing over their shoulders. She forced herself to breathe that image in, to let it fill the space where fear gnawed. But the scratching returned, faint yet insistent, and her eyes flew open again, to the same relentless dark. She realized then that the worst fear was not the rats, nor the water, nor even the suffocating space. It was the not knowing, the uncertainty that pressed against them harder than the steel walls, heavier than the sea itself. Hours bled together. Karim eventually slipped into shallow sleep, his small hand still locked in hers. The drip of water continued, the scratching faded and returned, and above it all, the ship carried them farther from everything they knew, deeper into a night that promised both salvation and ruin. And on that first night, Amira learned what it meant to keep fear silent, to hold it tight in her chest so it would not spread to the ones leaning on her. She kept counting her breaths, each one a fragile defiance, each one proof they were still alive. The third day in the container arrived without sunrise. There was no way to mark the hours except by the rhythm of their stomachs, hollow, insistent, echoing in the silence. Hunger became the clock, ticking louder than anything outside. The father had packed what little they could carry, a sack of flatbread hardened by travel, a few dried figs, a handful of nuts wrapped in paper. At first he divided it carefully, offering each of them equal shares, though his own portion always seemed smaller. By the second day, he cut the rations again, breaking crusts into thin strips, counting the figs one by one, his fingers trembling as he passed them into waiting hands. Now, on the third day, the sack was nearly empty. Karim sat cross-legged, his back pressed to his mother's side. His small face, once quick with questions, was pale, his lips dry. He chewed slowly on a sliver of bread, as if stretching it might trick his body into believing it was more than it was. His eyes shone with unshed tears, and every now and then he wiped at them quickly, ashamed to be caught crying. "Slowly, Habibi," his mother whispered, brushing crumbs from his chin. Her voice was soft but thin, as if the hunger had stolen something even from her words. Amira watched in silence, holding her own ration but not eating. She could not bear to swallow when her brother's eyes still begged for more. Instead, she tucked the bread into her pocket, saving it for later, though she knew later might never come. The father sat apart, leaning against the steel wall. He turned the empty sack over in his hands as if it might produce something hidden, some secret he had overlooked. His jaw clenched and unclenched, the muscles tight with helplessness. A man who had once been provider, strong and proud, now sat measuring the weight of nothing. Karim whimpered suddenly, the sound breaking into the stillness. His stomach growled loudly, and he curled into his mother's lap, pressing both hands against his belly. "It hurts," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Mama, it hurts." Her hand stroked his hair, tender despite the weakness in her fingers. "Shh," she murmured. "It will pass." "It doesn't pass," he cried softly, his face pressed against her dress. "It's like claws inside." The words tore through Amira, sharper than any hunger pang in her own body. She shifted closer, laying her hand over his. "Then hold mine," she said quickly, as if that could take some of the pain away. "Squeeze. Pretend it is claws, but outside, not inside." He tried, gripping her fingers, but his tears still came. The mother looked down at both of them, her face lined not with age, but with the weight of carrying them through this journey. Her lips trembled as she began to hum, low at first, so quiet it could have been mistaken for a breath. But slowly, the tune wove itself through the air, fragile yet steady. It was a lullaby from their childhood, the one she used to sing while kneading dough in the mornings. Amira remembered hearing it while lying in bed, sunlight spilling across the floorboards, her grandmother clattering pots in the kitchen. It had been the sound of safety, of ordinary days. Now, in the suffocating dark, the song carried new meaning. It was not a lullaby to put them to sleep, but to keep them from breaking. Her voice faltered on some notes, cracking with dryness, but she kept going. Karim's sobs quieted. His breathing slowed, sinking to the rhythm of the melody. He closed his eyes, still curled against her, and let the sound hold him where food could not. Amira listened, her throat tight. The song seemed to push back the container's walls for a moment, filling the space with memory instead of fear. She pressed her forehead to her knees, letting the notes seep into her bones. Across from them, the father lifted his head. His eyes glistened in the dark, though he said nothing. He only reached forward, finding his wife's hand in the blackness, and held it. For the first time in days, his breath came easier, carried by the fragile strength of her song. The hunger did not leave. It clawed and gnawed, a constant reminder of their fragility. But the lullaby dulled its teeth, if only for a little while. Hours passed, though whether 2 or 5 none of them could say. The food was gone. The last crumb had been shared. Karim's stomach growled again, but softer now, exhausted from protest. He drifted into sleep against his mother, his face streaked with dried tears. Amira stayed awake, staring into the void, her hands folded around the untouched piece of bread in her pocket. She thought of giving it to her brother in the morning, though she wasn't sure if morning even existed in a place like this. Her own body ached with emptiness, but she pressed her hunger down, burying it beneath determination. Her mother's voice had faded into silence. Still, the echo of the lullaby lingered, woven into the walls like a promise. We will endure this night. The ship creaked again, shifting with the waves. Somewhere above, boots clanged against steel, muffled voices carried on the wind. But inside the container, there was only the sound of shallow breaths, the quiet groan of metal, and the unspoken vow that they would not let go of each other. Not here, not now. Hunger gnawed, yes, but it had not yet taken hope. Inside the container, the air grew heavy, thick with the sourness of unwashed bodies and damp steel. Each breath was shallow, stolen. Each heartbeat seemed to echo too loudly. Hunger still gnawed at them, but worse was the closeness, the suffocating press of darkness that stretched without end. Amira leaned her head against the wall, eyes closed, though it made no difference. The blackness was absolute. For a moment, she felt her chest tighten, as though invisible hands pressed down, refusing her lungs their right to expand. Panic rose quick and hot, threatening to unspool her composure. To fight it, she reached for memory. She imagined herself in her old classroom. The windows had been tall and crooked, but light had always found its way in, laying golden stripes across the wooden desks. Dust motes drifted lazily in those beams, each one catching the light like a secret star. She remembered the smell, chalk and ink, and the faint sweetness of oranges, because one girl always carried them in her satchel. Her teacher, a woman with patient eyes, had once told her, "When the world feels too loud, count the colors around you." Amira had tried it then. Green of the chalkboard, brown of the desk, blue of a classmate's scarf. Now, in the stifling dark, she tried again. She whispered the list silently. The red of her grandmother's shawl, the yellow of the flower she had pressed, the turquoise paint that once chipped from their doorframe. With each remembered color, the weight in her chest eased, if only slightly. Her lips curved into the ghost of a smile, one so fragile it might have broken if anyone touched it. For a moment, she wasn't inside a steel coffin. She was back in a room filled with light, hearing the faint scrape of chalk and the murmur of friends. Beside her, Karim shifted. His small voice broke the silence, hesitant, as though he wasn't sure if words were still allowed. "Do you remember the square?" Amira blinked, startled. "What square?" "The one with the pigeons," he said, his tone gaining strength as he went. "By the fountain, where Baba used to take us." Her heart twisted. She did remember. The fountain had been chipped and dry most days, but when the water ran, it sparkled like glass. Karim had loved the pigeons, chasing them clumsily until they rose as one, wings clapping against the air. Their father had laughed every time, clapping too, as if his son's joy were his own. Karim's voice grew brighter in the dark, carrying him away from the present. Baba would buy bread from the stall, the round ones with sesame. He let me tear pieces, remember? I threw them, and the pigeons came close, so close I could feel their wings. He giggled softly, the sound thin but real. One landed on Baba's shoulder once. He stood so still because he didn't want it to fly away. You laughed at him. Amira could see it now, the way their father's face had lit up, unguarded, as the bird perched there like a crown. For a moment, he hadn't been weary or worried. He had been simply a man with his children, laughing in the sun. She let out a shaky breath, half a laugh, half a sob. "I laughed because you screamed, remember? You thought it would peck your ear." "I was little," Karim said defensively, though amusement colored his tone. Then it faded, replaced by a quieter truth. "I want to feed pigeons again." The words lingered, heavy with longing. Amira squeezed his hand. "You will. Maybe in America, they have even more pigeons." "Do they?" His voice was cautious, caught between hope and disbelief. "Of course," she said firmly, even though she didn't know. "Parks full of them. You'll chase them until your legs ache. Baba will laugh again. Mama will sit on a bench and watch. And I'll laugh too." The silence that followed was fragile but gentler. Their mother's hand, weak but steady, brushed across both children's heads. Her voice, raspy from thirst, whispered, "Yes, you will. One day soon." The father had been listening quietly, his broad shoulders hunched in the corner. Now he spoke, his voice low but steady, carrying the weight of memory too. "Your grandfather used to take me to that same square," he said. "He would sit by the fountain, and I would chase the birds. When I caught my breath, he told me, "The pigeons always return. No matter where they fly, they return." He paused, letting the words settle in the dark. I believe we are like those pigeons. No matter how far we travel, we carry home inside us. One day, you will see the songs, the stories, the laughter. We take them with us. They cannot be taken. The container swayed, groaning, as the ship rode the waves. But in that moment, the family's breathing synchronized. The blackness still pressed close, the hunger still gnawed, the fear still lingered. Yet within the rusted walls, memory became a kind of oxygen, thin, fleeting, but enough to keep them alive. Amira rested her head on her brother's shoulder. Karim, still whispering about pigeons, drifted towards sleep with a faint smile on his lips. Their mother hummed faintly, her voice a thread. Their father kept watch, but his face softened in the dark. And for a brief span of stolen minutes, the container was not just an iron coffin at sea. It was also a place where children remembered laughter, where parents remembered love, where the past, though gone, lent its breath to the present. By the fourth day, the container felt less like a room and more like a tomb drifting above the sea. The air, once only stale, had thickened into something heavy and hostile. Each inhale was shallow, as though the oxygen had been rationed like the bread, dwindling with every breath they took. Amira pressed her palm against the wall, as if touching the steel could remind her there was still a world outside. Wind, water, sky. But the metal was hot under her skin, radiating the sun it had absorbed all day. It felt like the body of the ship itself was sealing them in, trapping every gasp they made. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She tried to steady it, to count her breaths like before, but the rhythm broke. Numbers slipped from her as dizziness swept in. Each time she inhaled, the air scraped dry through her throat, tasting of rust and sweat. Karim lay across their mother's lap, his lips pale, his breath so faint she kept touching his chest just to feel the rise and fall. He had stopped asking questions. His eyes, half-lidded, followed shadows that weren't there. His small hand twitched, restless even in exhaustion, as though chasing the pigeons of his dream. The father crouched near the doors, pressing his ear to the seam. He knocked once, twice, then waited. Only silence answered. The ship groaned around them, indifferent. He pulled back, his face lined with something Amira had never seen before. Not anger, not even grief, but the raw helplessness of a man whose strength could not bend steel. Words came less often now. They cost too much air. Sentences fractured into fragments, fragments into whispers, until even the whispers faded. Amira wanted to speak, to tell Karim another story, to give her mother one more smile. But her throat refused. Each attempt left her coughing, the sound scraping out of her like gravel. Their mother's voice broke the silence at last. It was not strong. It was not even steady. But it carried, thin as a thread, through the suffocating dark. "Hold on," she whispered, stroking Karim's damp hair back from his forehead. "Hold on, my loves. Someone will hear us." The words hung in the air, fragile and unbelievable, yet even in their weakness, they mattered. Amira clung to them, rolling them silently through her mind. Hold on, as though repeating them could keep her anchored. The metal walls throbbed with the pulse of the sea. Every creak sounded like a warning, every vibration like the tolling of a bell. The container had its own silence, not peaceful, but suffocating. It was the silence of metal, heavy, endless, crushing. Amira shifted closer to her brother. His breathing was shallow, uneven. She pressed her forehead to his, forcing her own breath to slow, as if by sharing her rhythm, she could coax his lungs to keep moving. "With me," she mouthed, though her lips barely shaped the words. "With me." Her father lowered himself to the ground finally, his back against the door. His head dropped into his hands, and for the first time, Amira saw his shoulders tremble. The sound he made was not a sob. It was quieter than that. The muffled groan of a man unraveling silently. He covered it quickly, pulling himself back together, but the image seared itself into Amira's mind. The strongest person she knew, bending under the silence. Time fractured into strange pieces. At some point, a drop of water slid down the wall, splashing against the floor with a sound louder than it should have been. They all turned toward it instinctively, as if the drip had been a voice. Then nothing followed. The mother continued her mantra, though her breath faltered. "Hold on. Hold on." She tilted her face upward into the dark, as though directing her words through the steel, sending them skyward. "Someone will hear us." The ship shuddered suddenly, a deep lurch that rattled the bolts. For a moment, Amira's heart surged. She imagined hands outside, imagined voices shouting, the door swinging open to flood them with air, but nothing came. The ship steadied. The silence returned. She closed her eyes again, forcing herself to picture the classroom from her memories, the fountain with pigeons. She tried to see grass, sunlight, the taste of ice cream melting too fast. She held those visions against her mind like lanterns against the dark. If she let them slip, she feared the silence would devour everything. Her hand found her mother's. The woman's fingers were cold, trembling faintly. Amira squeezed, not too hard, but enough to say, "I hear you. I believe you." Karim stirred faintly, his lips parting. In the smallest voice he whispered, "America." The word was thin, fragile, but it glowed in the dark like a spark. Their mother bent low, pressing her lips to his forehead. "Yes, Habibi. America. Just hold on." The silence deepened, but it did not win. The family's breaths, shallow, ragged, but still there, became their rebellion. Proof that the steel walls had not yet stolen them completely. And somewhere above, beyond the weight of metal and sea, the world went on. Waves rose and fell. The patrol ship still roamed the waters. And though they could not know it yet, the moment of being heard was closer than they dared believe. The storm announced itself first with a low groan, deep and distant, like the earth itself shifting in its sleep. Then came the wind, howling against the hull of the ship, rattling chains and slamming loose metal in a chorus that felt more like war than weather. Inside the container, the family braced as the floor trembled beneath them. A sudden jolt threw Amira sideways, her shoulder colliding with the steel wall. The impact sent a sharp pain through her bones, but she didn't cry out. Karim clutched at her arm, his eyes wide in the dark, his breath already breaking into panicked sobs. The ship lurched again, harder this time. A wave slammed against the side with a sound like thunder striking hollow iron. The container shuddered, every rivet screaming under the force. For a heartbeat, Amira thought they would tip, thought the whole box would slide into the Black Sea and vanish beneath it. Her father wrapped his arms around them all, pulling them close to his chest. "Hold tight," he said, though the words were nearly swallowed by the storm. His voice shook, not from fear alone, but from the strain of holding 3 lives against the chaos. Water found its way inside. At first, it was a trickle, a thin line sliding from the roof where rust had gnawed through. Then more drops fell, faster, tapping against the steel floor like impatient fingers. Soon, a shallow puddle spread beneath them, chilling their feet, carrying with it the sharp metallic tang of salt and rust. Karim gasped at the touch of it. "It's coming in," he cried, his small voice breaking into hysteria. "Mama, it's coming in. We're going to drown." The mother gathered him quickly, pressing his face against her chest. Her own body trembled, but her voice fought for steadiness. "No, no, Habibi, it's just the rain, just the storm outside. The sea cannot take us if we hold on." But Amira knew her mother's tone, the way she stretched each word, softening its edges to disguise the truth. The water was no longer just dripping. It was seeping faster, finding every weakness in the steel. The container pitched sharply to the left. They all slid with it, bodies colliding, hands clawing for purchase on the slick floor. Amira's knee slammed hard against a corner, but she only clutched her brother tighter, shielding him with her thin frame. The sound of the storm was deafening now, a roar of wind and water battering the vessel as though it meant to tear it apart piece by piece. For a moment, the lights of memory tried to steady her. Her grandmother's gentle hands tending flowers in the courtyard, the pigeons Karim had loved, the laughter of her father in brighter days. But the storm ripped even those from her, dragging her back into the chaos of the present. The father raised his voice, fighting against the noise. "Stay low. Stay together." He spread his arms wider, pressing himself against the wall so his body could shield them from the cold spray dripping through the seams. His face was soaked, but he didn't flinch. The container tipped again, violently. Water pooled faster now, sloshing with each movement. Amira clung to Karim, who buried his face into her shoulder, sobbing into the fabric of her dress. His tears blended with the dampness until she couldn't tell one from the other. She whispered into his ear, words desperate but fierce. "Breathe with me. We won't drown. Not tonight. Not while I'm here." She counted for him again, 1 in, 1 out, even as her own lungs struggled to obey. The mother's lips moved silently, her eyes closed. At first, Amira thought she was whispering to Karim again, but then she realized it was prayer. Her words were offered not to reassure them, but to plead with the heavens above the steel, above the storm, above the merciless sea. The sound of the ship was terrifying, metal screeching, as if it were being torn apart, chains slapping like whips, waves crashing with the fury of mountains collapsing. Each slam reverberated through the container, rattling their bones. The floor itself felt unsteady, as if it might rip open at any moment and hurl them into the ocean's throat. Amira buried her face in Karim's hair, smelling the faint trace of sweat and salt, anchoring herself in the reminder that he was still alive. Her hand clutched his tightly, nails digging into his skin, not to hurt him, but to insist, "I will not let go." Time lost all measure. The storm raged on, unrelenting, until minutes stretched into eternities. Every breath was stolen from the air, every heartbeat was a protest against the sea's hunger. At last, a sudden calm fell, not true calm, but the eerie lull between waves. The ship steadied, if only briefly. The family remained pressed together, soaked, shivering, their breaths ragged in the aftermath. The puddle on the floor rippled faintly, reflecting what little light leaked from a seam above. Amira stared at it, her mind spinning with the realization of how close they had come, how thin the line was between survival and surrender. Her father finally spoke, his voice hoarse but firm. "The storm will pass," he said, though none of them believed storms simply passed. "We are still here. We are still together." The words were fragile, but they clung to them anyway. Because in that steel coffin tossed by the sea, survival was measured not in certainty, but in the fragile decision to keep believing. And as the ship drifted onward into the restless night, the family huddled tighter, shivering but alive, hearts beating stubbornly against the silence that followed the storm. The storm had eased, but its shadow lingered. Every creak of the hull felt like a warning, every drip of water like a countdown. The family sat huddled in the damp, their bodies pressed close, as though the weight of their closeness could hold the container steady. Their father had always been the strong one, the unbending spine of the family. He had spoken little these past days, choosing silence over false reassurances. When others had whispered fears, he had offered nods, brief touches, the kind of presence that said, "I will carry this without words." But now, in the aftermath of the storm, something inside him broke loose. His hands trembled as he rubbed them together, as if washing away an invisible stain. His face, glistening with sweat and seawater, turned upward, though there was nothing to see but darkness. And then, to the surprise of all, he began to pray aloud. His voice was hoarse at first, a rasp caught between breath and speech. "God, if you are listening." He stopped, swallowing hard, as if the words were heavier than anything he had carried before. His chest rose and fell, and then the words came again, steadier this time, echoing faintly against the steel walls. "You have taken so much from us," he said, his voice shaking with an edge of defiance. "Our home, our neighbors, the graves of our mothers and fathers. You left us with nothing but each other. And now you bring us across this sea." His wife's hand found his knee, her fingers trembling. She had never heard him pray this way. His faith had always been silent, folded into his actions. Bread baked, doors locked, children carried. But here, stripped bare, he let his voice crack open. "If we are meant to die," he continued, "then take me first. Leave them." His hand motioned toward his family, his voice breaking on the word. "Leave my wife. Leave my children. Let them see the land you promised, even if my eyes never do." Silence filled the container after his words, thick and reverent. Even the sea seemed to pause, the rhythm of its waves softening for a heartbeat. Amira sat frozen, her heart pounding. She had never seen her father bend like this, not in the face of soldiers, not in the face of hunger. His voice had always been stone, unyielding. To hear it break was like watching a wall crumble, revealing the raw earth beneath. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she pressed them down. Instead, she retreated inward, away from the darkness of the container, into a world of her own making. In her mind, she began to write a letter. She pictured a page, lined, smooth, smelling faintly of ink. She pictured her hand steady as it once had been at school, and she wrote, word by word, though only she could read them. "Dear Amira, the one who made it to America," she began silently. "If you are reading this, then you survived the dark. But you breathed when the air was thin. You held your brother's hand when fear wanted you to let go. You listened to your father pray when his voice cracked for the first time." The words steadied her, giving shape to the hope her lungs could not hold. She imagined herself years older, sitting at a desk by a window in some American city, unfolding this invisible letter and reading it like a gift. "You will walk streets that are not broken. You will drink water that is not rationed. You will hear children laugh without flinching. And when you feed pigeons in the square, you will remember Karim's small voice in the dark, and you will smile because he is beside you. Her lips twitched upward faintly in the dark. Even here, even now, she could conjure light. She pressed the phantom letter to her chest and whispered it silently again. Her father's prayer continued, softer now, more a confession than a plea. "I am afraid," he admitted, his forehead leaning against the steel. "I am afraid my strength is not enough. I am afraid this sea will swallow us. But if you give us one more dawn, if you give my children the chance to see the sun without bars between them and the sky, I will be grateful until the end of my days." The mother leaned into him, her lips moving soundlessly in her own prayer. Karim stirred, half asleep, murmuring a wordless hum. Amira tucked the imaginary letter into the folds of her memory, as though it might one day be delivered. Then she reached out, sliding her hand across the floor until it covered her father's. He flinched at first, caught in the rawness of his confession, then stilled. His hand closed over hers, rough and trembling. "I heard you," she whispered, her voice a thin thread. "And I will remember." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of her vow. That his prayers would not vanish into the silence of metal, that they would live inside her like oxygen until the day they could breathe freely again. The container rocked once more with the motion of the sea. The silence settled back around them, broken only by the drip of water and the sound of their uneven breathing. But in that silence, something had shifted. The father's voice had cracked, yes, yet in the breaking, he had given them a fragile kind of strength. The reminder that even in despair, a man could still ask for mercy. And Amira, with her letter unwritten but alive in her heart, carried that strength like a lantern in the dark. The air inside the container had become a thief. Each breath they took felt stolen, shallow, never enough. The steel walls pressed in like the ribs of a beast, squeezing the life out of its captives. Every inhalation rasped through dry throats. Every exhalation felt heavier, as if their lungs were trading oxygen for despair. Karim was the first to falter. At 9 years old, he had always been restless, a boy of constant movement, running after pigeons, chasing shadows down narrow alleys. But now he lay limp against his mother's lap, his eyelids fluttering as though each blink cost him strength, his lips pale and cracked, parted in uneven gasps. His chest rose, then stalled, then rose again in shallow spurts. "Karim?" Amira's voice cracked with fear. She shook his shoulder lightly. His head lolled, his body too soft in her hands. Panic clawed at her throat. "Baba! Mama!" The mother bent over him, her fingers trembling as they searched for the faint rise of his chest. "Habibi," she whispered, shaking him gently, her voice breaking. "Stay with me. Stay." The father moved fast, crawling across the floor to the door. He pounded his fists against the steel, the sound echoing hollow and useless into the void. Boom, boom, boom. His knuckles split against the rust, but he didn't stop. "Help!" he shouted, his voice muffled by the suffocating metal. He slammed harder, each strike fueled by desperation. "There are children in here." "Help us!" But the sea drowned him out. Waves crashed against the ship's hull, louder than any human plea. The storm had passed, but the ocean still groaned and shifted, swallowing their cries whole. The mother rocked Karim, pressing his small face to her chest. Her tears fell hot against his skin. "Breathe, Habibi. Please breathe. Don't leave me." Her lullabies had no power now. The melody caught in her throat, collapsing into sobs. Amira crouched beside them, gripping her brother's limp hand. It was clammy, almost weightless. Her own breath came in ragged bursts, but she forced herself closer, pressing her forehead against his. "With me," she whispered fiercely, as she had before. "One breath, just one." She inhaled deeply, exaggerating the sound, trying to will him to copy. But Karim's body barely stirred. Her father's fists slowed, exhaustion seeping into his muscles. He slumped against the door, his forehead pressed to the cold seam. The silence of unanswered knocks filled the container, heavier than the storm had ever been. His shoulders sagged, his hands trembling as they slid down the metal. "No one hears us," he murmured, the words barely more than a rasp. His eyes closed, as if admitting it aloud stripped him of the last thread of strength. Amira looked up at him, her chest burning. "Don't say that." Her voice cracked, but she forced it louder. "Don't say that." The silence that followed was unbearable. Only their uneven breaths filled the space, shallow, ragged, on the edge of breaking. The air felt thinner with every passing minute, as though the container itself had decided to starve them. Her mother clutched Karim tighter, rocking him gently. "Hold on," she whispered, over and over, the same words she had spoken before, but they sounded weaker now, more like a plea than a promise. Amira shut her eyes tight, summoning her letter again, the imaginary one she had begun writing to her future self. She forced herself to continue it in her mind, even as tears streamed hot and silent down her cheeks. "Dear Amira, if you are reading this, you lived through the silence. You held your brother when his breath faltered. You heard your father's fists against the steel, and you refused to believe the silence meant death. You believed, even when no one came." She clung to the letter as though it were oxygen, whispering the words in her mind like a prayer. Karim stirred faintly, a shallow cough escaping his chest. His body shifted in his mother's arms, fragile but alive. Relief surged through Amira so violently she nearly sobbed aloud. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "That's it, little one. That's it. Stay with me." The father opened his eyes, dragging himself upright again. His fists were torn and bleeding, but he pressed them once more against the steel, gentler this time, as though the container itself might take pity. "Please," he whispered to no one and everyone. "Please." The only answer was the drip of water from the ceiling, steady, merciless, falling into the shallow puddle on the floor. The silence of metal was complete. No voices, no footsteps, no rescue. Just the sound of a family's hope dimming, fading into the dark. Amira held her brother's hand tighter, pressing her lips to his knuckles. "I will not let you go," she whispered fiercely. "I will not." And though no one heard them, though the sea carried their cries away, though the steel box threatened to become their grave, they clung to each other in the suffocating dark. Their breaths were shallow, their bodies weak, but their love remained, defiant, desperate, alive. The sea stretched wide and endless, a restless grey expanse, under the pale wash of morning. Against it moved a U.S. Navy vessel, steel and discipline cutting across the water, its radar sweeping in steady arcs. For the crew, it was routine. Coffee on the bridge, banter about the emptiness of the horizon, the hum of engines carrying them forward. Then a freighter appeared on the edge of sight. Rust streaked its hull, containers stacked 3 high, its deck silent. No flags, no smoke, no sign of life. "Dead ship," Ensign Ramirez muttered, squinting through binoculars. "Odd she's sitting that low in the water," Lieutenant Ellison replied, gaze sharp. He gave the order. "Mark coordinates. Run a sweep." On deck, sailors moved brisk but casual, their boots clanging against steel. The morning was another patrol, another drifting rust bucket. But one pair of eyes told a different story. Rex, the German Shepherd K9, padded at the rail beside his handler, Officer Daniel Cole. The dog's vest bore the stark letters, Police K9, his stride confident, ears swiveling to every sound. Daniel kept the leash loose, more habit than necessity. "Routine, boy," he murmured. Just another morning. But Rex had stopped listening. His nose twitched against the salt wind, head snapping toward the freighter. Muscles tensed, tail rigid, a growl rising from deep in his chest. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" The growl broke into barks, sharp, insistent, each one louder than the last. Rex lunged forward, claws scraping at the deck, barking furiously at a single faded red container. Sailors turned, startled, muttering. "Probably rats," Daniel said, tugging the leash. But the words rang hollow. He had seen Rex like this before, on bomb sweeps, on rescues. The dog didn't guess. He knew. Rex braced at the railing, front paws clawing, as if he could tear the steel open himself. His barks turned hoarse, raw with urgency. Daniel dropped to one knee, gripping his harness, feeling the tremor of certainty in his muscles. The chatter on deck quieted. Sailors stared at the shepherd, his voice carrying above the sea wind. And in that moment, Daniel knew. Rex was telling them the container was not empty. "Cole!" Lieutenant Ellison's voice cut across the deck. He strode toward them, binoculars swinging against his chest. "Control your animal. What's the issue?" Daniel rose, still holding Rex's harness as the dog barked frantically, claws scraping, tail stiff as a rod. He looked his superior in the eye, his voice steady but firm. "Sir, Rex has a lock on something in that container. He's not letting it go." Ellison frowned, glancing toward the freighter. "Cargo, old steel, probably vermin." "Maybe," Daniel admitted. "But I've had this dog for 3 years. He's never been wrong." Rex's bark cracked into a howl, raw and piercing, echoing across the open water. He clawed harder, as though trying to tear the truth from behind the steel. Ellison's jaw tightened. He looked again at the freighter, silent, rusting, adrift. Then he looked at the dog, muscles quivering with instinct, refusing to back down. Finally, he nodded once, curtly. "All right," he said. "Log the anomaly. Prep a boarding party. If Rex says there's something in that container, we'll check." Relief flooded Daniel's chest. He crouched again, pressing a hand firmly against Rex's shoulder. "Good boy," he murmured, his voice thick with pride. "Good boy. You did it." But Rex wasn't soothed. He didn't stop barking. He didn't stop clawing. His eyes stayed locked on the container, fierce and unblinking, as though he knew lives were pressed inside, fading with every stolen breath. The sailors watched in silence now, their easy jokes forgotten, their casual rhythm broken. Something was there, something more than cargo. And the only one who knew it for certain was a German shepherd who refused to look away. The sea rocked beneath them, the freighter looming closer, silent as a grave. But on the Navy deck, the silence had been broken. Rex had torn it open with his voice, and nothing would be routine again. The boarding party moved across the freighter's deck with the measured caution of men who had seen the sea hide too many secrets. Their boots clanged against corroded steel, the air thick with the smell of salt and oil. Rust streaked every surface, flaking away beneath their gloves, as if the ship itself were decaying into the ocean. Lieutenant Ellison led the way, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cap. Behind him came Officer Daniel Cole with Rex at his side, the dog straining at the leash, every muscle taut, every bark echoing across the empty decks. Sailors followed close, rifles slung, eyes sweeping the silent stacks of containers that loomed over them like walls in a forgotten city. "Container row's dead quiet," one of the sailors muttered, glancing nervously at the towers of rust. "Then why's the dog losing his mind?" another whispered back. Daniel kept his focus on Rex. The shepherd's claws skittered on steel as he pulled forward, dragging Daniel with surprising strength for his size. His barks had grown hoarse, but he refused to relent. His entire body aimed at a single, battered container, half hidden in the middle row. Its paint was faded, its edges eaten with corrosion. One hinge bent, as if the door itself had grown tired of standing guard. They stopped before it. The sailors spread out, some watching the perimeter, others circling the container. Ellison stepped forward, pressing his palm against the cool steel. The surface vibrated faintly with the hum of the ship beneath, but nothing else. He rapped twice with his knuckles. The hollow clang rang out, sharp, echoing into silence. The crew held their breath, listening. Nothing answered. "Empty," one sailor muttered, but Rex did not believe it. The dog threw himself forward with a sudden surge, slamming his paws against the container's side. His claws screeched against the rust, leaving thin trails in the paint. He barked furiously, his entire body rigid with urgency. Daniel knelt quickly, gripping his harness. "Easy, Rex." But Rex snapped his head back, eyes fierce, as if to say there was no easy. He pressed his muzzle hard against the seam of the door, inhaling, growling low, then exploding again into sharp, desperate barks. He clawed at the steel with such force that sparks of rust flaked into the air. Ellison frowned, stepping closer. Something's got him riled. He tapped the container again, harder this time, his fist echoing like a drum. Still, nothing but silence. A sailor shook his head. "Sir, maybe it's just vermin. Rats. Maybe. The dog smells them." Rex barked so sharply, it cut the man off mid-sentence. Then, as if to prove his case, he lunged again, throwing his full weight into the steel. His chest hit the wall with a dull thud. He backed up, barking wildly, his breath coming in quick bursts of white mist in the cool sea air. Daniel's heart hammered. He had seen Rex on countless calls, searching warehouses, sniffing out explosives, locating missing children. He had never seen him like this. This wasn't routine detection. This was something primal, urgent, a refusal to back down. "Sir," Daniel said, his voice low but firm. "He's telling us something's alive in there." Ellison's jaw tightened. He looked again at the container. Rust streaks, bent hinge, silent as a grave. And then, thud, so faint it could have been imagined. The men froze. Another thud, weak, uneven. A pause. Then, two more, clustered together, muffled through steel, but unmistakable. "Jesus," one sailor breathed. "That's not vermin." The sound stopped. Silence stretched again, heavy and suffocating. And then, faint as the last flicker of a candle, came another thud. Not strong, not rhythmic, just desperate. The sailors looked at each other, wide-eyed. The reality settled over them like a weight. Someone was inside. Rex barked triumphantly, claws raking the steel in frenzied confirmation. His tail lashed stiffly, his body vibrating with urgency. He had been right all along. Daniel pressed his hand against the container, feeling the faintest vibration beneath the metal skin. He leaned close, his voice steady but urgent. "Hold on. We hear you. We're here." No words came back, only another weak thump, as if every ounce of strength had been poured into that single reply. The crew sprang into motion. One sailor radioed back to the Navy ship, his voice taut. "We've got signs of life inside a container. Repeat, signs of life." Ellison barked orders. "Get the tools. Now, cut that lock." But even as the men scattered, Daniel stayed pressed against the steel, his hand flat, his head bowed close. He could almost imagine the people on the other side, their palms pressed back against the same wall, separated only by a few inches of corroded metal. "Hold on," he whispered again, his throat tight. "You're not alone anymore." Inside the container, Amira's eyes fluttered open at the sound of the knock. She pressed her weak hand against the steel, her pulse faint but stubborn. She didn't know if anyone could hear, but she pushed once more, thudding the wall with the last of her strength. Her mother whispered hoarsely, "Again, Habibti, just once more." Amira's fist struck feebly, and for the first time in days, she thought she heard something answered. Not silence, not the sea, but voices. Outside, Rex barked relentlessly, his body refusing to leave the door. The crew worked frantically, tools clanging against the lock, sparks flying into the damp air. The sea heaved beneath them, but none of them cared. Because now, the silence of metal had been broken. The family's weak thuds had crossed the void, carried by desperation, answered by the bark of a dog who would not stop until they were free. The deck of the freighter came alive with urgency. Orders cracked across the salt air, boots clattered on steel, and sparks flew as sailors dragged forward torches and cutters. What had been a routine patrol was suddenly a fight against time. There were lives trapped inside this rusting coffin, and every second mattered. Rex was the loudest voice on deck. The German shepherd hurled himself at the container door, barking furiously, claws tearing fresh grooves into the rust. His cries rose above the grinders and shouted orders, raw, desperate, unrelenting. Daniel held the harness tight, murmuring, "Easy, boy. We'll get them out." But Rex strained harder, his body insisting that waiting was not an option. Inside, the noise was terrifying. The screech of metal against metal roared through the walls, like monsters clawing to get in. Amira's brother Karim sobbed into their mother's chest, trembling. Their father pressed an ear to the seam, dreading in his voice. Smugglers. The word froze the air. Soldiers might detain them, but smugglers could mean worse. Then, cutting through the grinding, came something else. A bark. Karim's head jerked up, eyes wide. "Mama! A dog!" Another bark followed, closer this time, claws scrabbling against steel. Amira's breath caught. Smugglers did not bring dogs. Rescuers did. Hope pierced the suffocating dark. "Maybe," she whispered, clutching her brother tight. "Maybe it's not the end." Outside, sparks sprayed orange as the lock finally gave way with a sharp snap. Silence fell heavy. Then crowbars wedged in, sailors heaved, and the doors groaned open. Light poured in, Blinding, merciless sunlight ripped into the steel tomb, flooding lungs with salt air. Karim screamed, burying his face in his mother's chest. Amira raised her hands against the glare. Their father staggered forward, collapsing at the threshold, kissing the deck as though it were holy ground. Sailors rushed in, wrapping blankets around trembling shoulders, pressing oxygen masks against cracked lips. A medic cradled Karim, whispering, "Breathe, you're safe." The boy whimpered, then gasped deeper than he had in days. His whisper was faint but clear. "Air." Amira lingered in the shadow, frozen, fear locking her knees. The noise outside was too vast, too loud. Then she felt it, warm fur brushing her wrist. Rex. He had pushed forward, muzzle pressed against her skin, eyes steady and certain. Her hand tangled into his coarse fur. A sob tore free. She surged forward at last, collapsing into him. Arms wrapped around the shepherd's neck, her tears soaking into his coat. He stilled, lowering his head against her chest, his breath calm and steady, a rhythm promising that the nightmare was over. Around them, the deck buzzed with shouts and hurried steps. But at the center of it knelt a girl, clinging to the dog, who had refused to let her vanish into silence. For the first time in weeks, the darkness was broken not by fear, but by breath, ragged, grateful, alive. The sea had calmed to a gentle rhythm, rolling the ship in a slow sway. Above stretched a wide blue sky, clouds drifting like torn linen. Hours earlier the deck had rung with panic and sparks. Now it was washed in sunlight, carrying not just sailors, but 4 survivors, wrapped in navy coats too large for their thin frames. The wool smelled of salt and oil, but to them it was salvation. A medic placed steaming tin cups into their hands, thin broth, salty and warm. The mother cupped hers tightly, her trembling fingers spilling drops as she lifted it. Each sip sent tears sliding down her cheeks, as though warmth itself was unbearable after so much cold. The father drank in quiet gulps, shoulders still bent under the weight of ordeal, but his grip on the cup was fierce, as proof he still lived. Karim clutched his with both hands, steam fogging his cheeks. He licked the broth from his lips and whispered, almost shyly, "It tastes like home, only hotter." His fragile laugh broke into coughs, but when his sister stroked his back, he smiled weakly. Amira raised her own cup, the heat seeping into frozen fingers. The broth burned her tongue, but she welcomed it, drinking deeper, warmth spreading through her hollow chest. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel only cold. Her eyes lifted beyond the rim of the cup to the horizon, endless, shimmering, a line of silver between water and sky. No walls, no darkness. The ocean is no longer a trap, but a road. She whispered, "We made it." The wind nearly stole the words, but her mother heard and repeated them, firmer. The father nodded slowly, his hand settling on his son's shoulder. Karim lifted his cup, his voice no louder than tin against teeth. "We made it." A few steps away, Rex watched. The shepherd's black coat gleamed in sunlight, his vest strapped tight across his chest. His ears flicked with each sound, eyes locked on the family. Even now his body stayed tense, guarding them from the sea itself. Daniel crouched beside him, hand resting on the dog's back. "Easy, boy. They're safe now. You did your job." But Rex did not relax. His gaze lingered on Amira, who pressed her free hand into the fur at his neck. She leaned close, whispering words only the dog could read on her lips. "Thank you." The deck hushed. Sailors who had shouted orders during the rescue now moved softly, voices subdued, their eyes drawn again and again to the family. It felt less like duty than grace. Waves lapped steady against the hull. A gull wheeled overhead, its cry fading into the sky. The ship pressed forward, carrying both the weight of what had been saved and the fragile hope of what was to come. Amira sipped again, tasting rust still on her tongue, but feeling it peel away, layer by layer, replaced by broth, by wind, by sky. She whispered it once more, stronger now. We made it. And around her, parents, brother, sailors, and the dog who had refused to let them vanish, all bore witness to the truth of it. Wrapped in oversized coats, the family huddled close beneath the open sky. Karim, nearly swallowed by his blanket, had finished most of his broth, but still fidgeted, his eyes restless, exploring the deck, as if rediscovering the world. Then he saw Rex. The shepherd sat a few feet away, ears flicking, body coiled in alert silence. Police K9 stark on his vest. His gaze was softer now, fixed on the family he had pulled from silence. Karim hesitated, small fingers clutching his blanket. His mother stroked his hair, but his eyes stayed locked on the dog. Slowly, he stretched out his hand. "Rex," Daniel said gently, crouching beside the shepherd. "It's all right. Go on." Rex turned his head, gaze heavy on the boy. Karim froze, awed by the size, the power in the broad shoulders and chest. Then, with deliberate grace, Rex lowered himself to the deck and crept closer, paws clicking on steel until he reached the blanket's edge. He stopped, nose brushing against the folds, waiting. Karim's hand trembled, hovering. Rex closed the gap himself, nudging his head gently against the boy's hand. A smile broke across Karim's tired face, spreading wide enough to light his hollow features. Tentative strokes became bolder, fingers sinking into coarse fur along the shepherd's neck and shoulder. Then Rex lowered his head fully into the boy's lap. The motion was simple but carried the weight of an oath. His body relaxed, eyes half closed, declaring silently, "This child is mine now, and I will guard him." Karim gasped at the warmth and weight, then laughed, a cracked, thin laugh, but a laugh. Stroking the dog's ears, he whispered in awe, "He chose me." Amira smiled faintly, brushing her brother's shoulder. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." Their mother covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For days she had held her son against death, helpless as his breath faltered. Now she saw him smile, saw color return, and it undid her. The father sat straighter, lips moving in quiet thanks. Around them, sailors paused their work, hushed. They had seen the dog drag explosives from rubble, sniffing out weapons in crates. But this was different. This was not command or training. It was instinct, loyalty, love. Daniel's voice softened. "He knows," he told the family. "He knows you were there. He knows you need him." Karim bent lower, cheek pressed against Rex's head, whispering words only the shepherd could hear. Rex's ear flicked, breath steady against the boy's lap. For a moment, the world shrank to just them, a child reclaimed from fear and a dog who had refused to stop until someone listened. The ship rocked gently onward. Above, gulls wheeled white against the sky. On the deck, silence stretched soft and whole, as though everyone felt it too. This was not a chance. This was the beginning of something unbreakable. Night fell gently. The storm's roar was long gone, replaced by the steady hum of engines, a heartbeat carrying them across dark water. The sky above opened wide with stars, glittering reminders that there was still light beyond shadow. The family rested in the infirmary, cots lined along the bulkhead. Heavy blankets wrapped them in warmth, the air sharp with antiseptic, softened by the faint aroma of broth, lingering still. Karim slept deeply for the first time in days, curled beneath wool, his face peaceful at last. Their mother dozed nearby, lips twitching with whispered prayers. The father lay beside her, his hand across her arm, as though even sleep could not pry them apart. But Amira could not close her eyes. She sat upright, her diary across her knees. The book was battered, spine cracked, pages warped by damp. She had carried it through their flight from home, through the suffocating dark, clutching it as her mother clutched the photo album. It was not merely a diary. It was proof she still existed, that her thoughts mattered even when the world tried to silence them. The pen hovered over a blank page. Words felt too vast to capture, but slowly she pressed down and wrote, "We were born again today." The letters were shaky, uneven, but pressed deep, etched like stone. She paused, staring at them, breath-catching. It was true. When the doors had opened and light had rushed in, it had felt like birth, violent and blinding, but full of air, full of possibility. Tears blurred her vision as she wrote more, about the lock giving way, the sunlight burning but healing, the way Karim had smiled when Rex laid his head in his lap. Each word anchored her, proving survival. She paused often, listening. Rex lay stretched across the floor near their cots, vest loosened, head on his paws. His chest rose and fell with the slow rhythm of deep rest, ears flicking even in sleep. His steady breathing filled the room like a low, calming tide. Amira closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. These were not the shallow, desperate breaths of suffocating dark. These were full, endless, the sound of safety. She turned her head to watch him. In the dim light, he looked less like a soldier and more like something eternal. A guardian angel placed between her and the dark. She pressed her pen down again. Tonight, I will sleep because he breathes beside me. Her throat tightened as the ink bled into paper. She traced the words, then closed the diary and pressed it to her chest. Her heart still raced, but softer now, calmed by Rex's steady breath, by the sight of her brother sleeping only feet away. She whispered quietly, "Thank you." Rex stirred faintly, one ear twitching, but did not lift his head. His breathing remained steady, anchoring the room. At last, Amira lay back, curling beneath her blanket. She tucked the diary under her pillow, hand resting against its edge. Her eyes lingered on the shepherd's outline, unwilling to surrender to sleep. But slowly, her eyelids grew heavy. Her last sight was Rex's chest rising and falling like the tide. A silent sentinel who needed no command to promise her this. She was safe. And with that, Amira drifted into her first true sleep since the night her father had whispered, "We leave tonight." The sea had calmed to a gentle rhythm, rolling the ship in a slow sway. Above stretched a wide blue sky, clouds drifting like torn linen. Hours earlier, the deck had rung with panic and sparks. Now it carried 4 survivors wrapped in navy coats too large for their thin frames. The wool smelled of salt and oil, but to them it was salvation. A medic placed steaming tin cups into their hands, thin broth, salty and warm. The mother cupped hers tightly, trembling as she lifted it. Each sip sent tears down her cheeks, as though warmth itself was unbearable after so much cold. The father drank in quiet gulps, shoulders still bent under the ordeal, but his grip on the cup was fierce, as if it proved he still lived. Karim clutched his cup with both hands, steam fogging his cheeks. "It tastes like home," he whispered shyly. His laugh broke into coughs, but when his sister stroked his back, he smiled again. Amira raised her cup, the broth burning her tongue, but she welcomed it, drinking deeper, warmth sliding into the hollowness of her chest. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel only cold. Her eyes lifted beyond the rim to the horizon, endless, shimmering, a line of silver between water and sky. No walls, no darkness. The ocean is no longer a trap, but a road. She whispered, "We made it." Her mother repeated it, firmer. The father nodded, hand settling on his son's shoulder. Karim lifted his cup, his voice no louder than tin against teeth. "We made it." A few steps away, Rex watched. The shepherd's black coat gleamed in sunlight, his vest strapped tight. His ears flicked at each sound, eyes locked on the family. Even now, his body stayed tense, as if guarding them from the sea itself. Daniel crouched beside him, hand resting on the dog's back. "Easy, boy. They're safe now." But Rex did not relax. His gaze lingered on Amira, who pressed her free hand into his fur. She leaned close, lips forming silent words. "Thank you." The deck hushed. Sailors moved softly now, their eyes drifting back to the family. Duty felt like grace. Waves lapped steady against the hull. A gull wheeled overhead. The ship pressed forward, carrying both the weight of what had been saved and the fragile hope of what was to come. Wrapped in oversized coats, the family huddled close. Karim, nearly swallowed by his blanket, had finished most of his broth, but still fidgeted, restless eyes exploring the deck as if rediscovering the world. Then he saw Rex. The shepherd sat nearby, police canine stark on his vest, gaze fixed on the family. Karim hesitated, fingers clutching his blanket. Slowly, he stretched out his hand. "Rex," Daniel said gently, crouching. "Go on." Rex turned his head, gaze heavy on the boy. Karim froze, awed by the power in the broad shoulders and chest. Then, with deliberate grace, Rex lowered himself and crept closer, paws clicking until he reached the blanket's edge. He stopped, waiting. Karim's hand trembled, hovering. Rex closed the gap himself, nudging his head gently against the boy's hand. A smile broke across Karim's face, spreading wide enough to light his hollow features. Tentative strokes became bolder, fingers sinking into coarse fur. Then Rex lowered his head fully into the boy's lap. The motion was simple, but carried the weight of an oath. His body relaxed, eyes half closed, declaring silently, "This child is mine now, and I will guard him." Karim gasped at the warmth and weight, then laughed. A cracked laugh, but real. Stroking the dog's ears, he whispered, "He chose me." Amira smiled faintly. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." Their mother covered her mouth, sobbing, shaking her shoulders. For days, she had held her son against death. Now she saw him smile. The father sat straighter, lips moving in quiet thanks. Around them, sailors paused their work, hushed. They had seen the dog clear explosives and sniff out weapons. But this was different. This was instinct, loyalty, love. Daniel's voice softened. He knows you need him." For a moment, the world shrank to just them. A child reclaimed from fear, and a dog who had refused to stop until someone listened. The ship rocked gently onward. Above, gulls wheeled white against the sky. On the deck, silence stretched soft and whole, as though everyone felt it too. This was not a chance. This was the beginning of something unbreakable. Night fell. The storm's roar was gone, replaced by the hum of engines carrying them across dark water. Stars glittered overhead, light beyond shadow. The family rested in the infirmary. Karim slept deeply, his face peaceful. Their mother dozed with whispered prayers on her lips. The father lay beside her, his hand across her arm, as though even sleep could not pry them apart. But Amira could not close her eyes. She sat upright, diary across her knees. The book was battered, spine cracked, pages warped. It was proof she still existed. Her thoughts still mattered, even when the world tried to silence them. The pen hovered over a blank page. Slowly she pressed down and wrote, "We were born again today." The letters were shaky, but etched like stone. She paused, breath catching. It was true. When the doors had opened and light rushed in, it had felt like birth, violent, blinding, but full of air, full of possibility. Tears blurred her vision as she wrote more. About the lock giving way, the sunlight burning but healing, the way Karim had smiled when Rex laid his head in his lap. She stopped often, listening. Rex lay stretched across the floor, vest loosened, head on his paws. His chest rose and fell with the slow rhythm of deep rest. His breathing filled the room like a calming tide. Amira turned to watch him. In the dim light, he looked less like a soldier and more like something eternal, a guardian angel. She pressed her pen down again. "Tonight, I will sleep because he breathes beside me." She closed the diary, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Thank you." Rex stirred faintly, one ear twitching, but did not lift his head. His steady breathing anchored the room. At last, Amira lay back, eyelids heavy. Her last sight was Rex's chest rising and falling like the tide, a silent sentinel promising her this. She was safe. Morning broke with pale golden light spilling across the harbor. The ship groaned as it slowed, edging toward the dock. For the family huddled near the railing, the sight of land felt unreal, too vivid after days of silence and dark. Flags flapped in the breeze. Voices carried in English, fast and unfamiliar. The harbor swarmed with officials, interpreters, aid workers, ambulances, crates marked with red crosses. The noise rolled toward them like a wave. Karim shrank back, covering his ears. Too loud. His mother pressed her cheek to his hair. "Only voices, Habibi. Only people." But her eyes scanned the crowd warily. The father gripped the railing, unblinking, as if afraid the land might vanish. Amira clutched her diary against her chest, whispering, "It's real. It has to be." Rex stood steady beside her, leaning subtly toward the family. The ship's horn bellowed. Ropes flew. Gangways lowered with metallic clatter. The connection was made. Sea to land, despair to hope. Guided forward, the family hesitated at the surge of officials and flashing cameras. The father shielded them instinctively until sailors waved the crowd back. Aid workers hurried with blankets and bottles. An interpreter spoke halting words in their tongue. "Welcome, safe, no more danger." Their mother wept at the sound. On land, they were ushered into a plain room. 2 officers sat with clipboards, interpreter ready. Questions began. The father struggled with English. "We leave. War. No house. Children. Not safe. Shame flickered in his eyes. Amira's chest tightened. Without thinking, she lifted her chin. He says, "We ran from war. Our home was destroyed. Not safe for children." Her English was shaky, but enough. The officers looked up. "You speak English?" She nodded. "Some." Her father turned to her, startled. She met his gaze. "I can try, Baba." And so she did. Halting but determined, she explained, 4 days, maybe 5. No air, no food, dark." She paused, then added, voice breaking, "The dog, he saved us." Her words filled the silence. Pens slowed. One officer said softly, "You were very brave." She shook her head. "Not brave. We only held on." Her father reached for her hand under the table, eyes glistening. "You spoke for us. You gave us breath again." By the time the questioning ended, Amira's voice was frayed, but she had found something new inside herself. Courage. Later, in a wide room buzzing with aid workers, families, and children clutching toys, they sat at a table. A young worker brought a jug of milk, pouring carefully into glasses. Karim's eyes widened. He lifted the glass with both hands, sipping cautiously. His eyes grew wide. "It tastes like the stories," he whispered. Silence fell. Their mother wept, covering her mouth. Their father bowed his head, and Amira laughed. It burst out of her suddenly, light cracking through weeks of silence. She clutched her diary, shoulders shaking with laughter tangled in tears. Karim looked up, puzzled, then smiling too. "Why are you laughing?" he asked, milk glistening on his lip. She wiped it with her sleeve. "Because you sound like Baba did when he told us about this place. You believed the stories, and now you're drinking them." "It's real," Karim whispered. "Yes," their mother murmured, pulling him close. "It's real." Rex lay close, ears flicking at the sound of laughter, head tilting curiously. Slowly he lowered himself, eyes steady on the family. Amira lifted her own glass, tasting the milk. Cool, creamy, so different from rust and darkness. She swallowed, pressing the glass to her forehead, whispering, "It tastes like freedom." Her father's hand covered hers briefly. "Remember this day," he said. "The day small miracles became larger than fear." The room buzzed with voices, clinking trays, shuffling boots. But at their table, time slowed. A boy sipping milk, a girl laughing again, a family wrapped in coats, stitched back together by survival. Amira looked at Rex. "You gave us this," she whispered. "You gave us back our laughter." The shepherd blinked slowly, eyes closing as his breathing settled steady and calm. And for the first time since the coffin of steel, the family did not feel like refugees fleeing death. They felt alive, alive enough to taste, alive enough to laugh, alive enough to believe that even small miracles, like a glass of milk, could carry the weight of a promise. The sea had calmed to a gentle rhythm, rocking the ship with a slow sway. Hours earlier, panic had gripped its decks. Now the sunlight spread soft and wide across the survivors. 4 figures wrapped in navy coats, too large for their thin frames. The wool smelled of salt and oil, but to them, it was salvation. A medic placed steaming tin cups into their hands. Thin broth, salty and warm. The mother cupped hers tightly, trembling as she raised it. Each sip drew tears down her cheeks, as though warmth itself was too much after so much cold. The father drank in quiet gulps, his shoulders bent under the ordeal, clutching the cup as if it alone proved he still lived. Karim gripped him with both hands, steam fogging his cheeks. "It tastes like home," he whispered shyly. His laugh broke into coughs, but when his sister stroked his back, he smiled again. Amira raised her own cup, burning her tongue but drinking deeper, warmth sliding into the hollowness of her chest. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel only cold. Her eyes lifted to the horizon, endless and shimmering, silver between water and sky. No walls, no darkness. The ocean is no longer a trap, but a road. She whispered, "We made it." Her mother repeated the words, firmer. The father nodded, his hand settling on Karim's shoulder. The boy lifted his cup, whispering, "We made it." A few steps away, Rex watched. The shepherd's black coat gleamed in sunlight, his vest strapped tight. His ears flicked at each sound, but his eyes stayed fixed on the family. Even now his body stayed tense, as though guarding them from the sea itself. Daniel crouched beside him, resting a hand on his back. "Easy, boy. They're safe now." But Rex did not relax. His gaze lingered on Amira, who pressed her free hand into his fur. She leaned close, lips forming silent words. "Thank you." The deck hushed. Sailors moved softly now, their eyes drifting toward the family. Duty felt closer to grace. Wrapped in oversized coats, the family huddled close. Karim, nearly swallowed by his blanket, finished his broth and fidgeted, eyes roaming the deck, as though rediscovering the world. Then he saw Rex. The shepherd sat a few feet away, police canine stark on his vest, gaze steady. Karim hesitated, then slowly stretched out his hand. "Rex," Daniel said gently. "Go on." Rex lowered himself with deliberate grace, padding closer until his nose brushed the blanket. Karim's hand hovered, trembling, until Rex nudged forward, pressing his head against the boy's palm. A smile bloomed across Karim's face, fragile but radiant. Tentative strokes became bolder. Then Rex lowered his head fully into the boy's lap. The motion was simple, but heavy with meaning. His body relaxed, eyes half closed, declaring silently, "This child is mine now. I will guard him." Karim gasped, then laughed, a cracked but living sound. Stroking the dog's ears, he whispered, "He chose me." Amira smiled faintly. "Yes," she whispered. "He did." Their mother covered her mouth, shoulders trembling with sobs. For days, she had held her son against death. Now she saw him smile. Their father sat straighter, lips moving in quiet thanks. Around them, sailors paused, hushed. They had seen Rex drag explosives from rubble, sniffing out weapons in crates. But this was different. This was instinct, loyalty, love. Night fell gently, the hum of engines carrying them across dark water. Stars glittered above, light beyond shadow. In the infirmary, the family rested. Karim slept deeply for the first time in days. Their mother dozed, lips whispering prayers even in sleep. Their father lay beside her, his hand across her arm, as though even dreams could not pry them apart. But Amira could not close her eyes. She sat upright, diary across her knees. Its pages were warped, its spine cracked, but it was proof she still existed. The pen hovered over a blank page. Slowly she wrote, "We were born again today." The letters came shaky, but pressed deep, etched like stone. Tears blurred her eyes as she wrote more. About the lock giving way, the sunlight flooding in, the way Karim had smiled when Rex laid his head in his lap. She paused often, listening. Rex lay stretched across the floor, vest loosened, head on his paws. His chest rose and fell with a slow rhythm. His breathing filled the room like a calming tide. In the dim light, he looked less like a soldier, more like something eternal, a guardian angel. Amira pressed her pen again. "Tonight, I will sleep because he breathes beside me." She closed the diary, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Thank you." Rex stirred faintly, one ear twitching, but did not lift his head. His breathing anchored the room. And at last, Amira lay back, eyelids heavy. Her last sight was Rex's chest rising and falling like the tide, a silent sentinel promising her this: she was safe. Morning broke with pale gold spilling across the harbor. The ship slowed with a groan of steel, edging against the dock. For the family huddled near the railing, the sight of land felt unreal. Flags flapped in the breeze. The pier swarmed with officials, interpreters, aid workers, ambulances. Voices in English rose, fast and sharp. Karim pressed against his mother. "Too loud," he whispered, covering his ears. She bent down, soothing. "Only voices, Habibi. Only people." The ship's horn bellowed. Ropes flew. Gangways clattered. Sea met land. Despair met hope. Guided forward, they hesitated at the flashing cameras. The father shielded them instinctively. Aid workers hurried with blankets and bottles. An interpreter spoke halting words in their tongue. "Welcome. Safe. No more danger." Their mother wept at the sound. On land, they were ushered into a plain room. 2 officers sat with clipboards. The father tried English, voice halting. "We leave. War. No house. Children. Not safe." Shame flickered in his eyes. Amira's chest tightened. She lifted her chin. "He says, we ran from war. Our home was destroyed. Not safe for children." Her English was shaky, but enough. The officers looked up. "You speak English?" She nodded. "Some." Her father turned to her, startled. She met his gaze. "I can try, Baba." And so she did. 4 days, maybe 5. No air, no food, dark. Her voice cracked, then steadied. "The dog, he saved us." Silence followed. One officer softened his tone. "You were very brave." Amira shook her head. "Not brave. We only held on." Her father squeezed her hand. "You gave us breath again," he whispered. By the time questioning ended, her voice was frayed, but courage had taken root. Later, in a wide hall, the family sat among other refugees. Aid workers served food. Just a young volunteer set a jug of milk before them. Karim lifted his glass with both hands, sipping cautiously. His eyes widened. "It tastes like the stories," he whispered. Silence fell. Their mother covered her mouth, tears spilling. Their father bowed his head, and Amira laughed. The sound burst out of her suddenly, light cracking through weeks of silence. Karim stared, then grinned too. "Why are you laughing?" he asked, milk glistening on his lip. She wiped it with her sleeve. "Because you sound like Baba did when he told us about this place. You believed the stories, and now you're drinking them." "It's real," Karim whispered. "Yes," their mother murmured, pulling him close. "It's real." Amira tasted her own glass, the cool cream so different from rust and smoke. She pressed it to her forehead, whispering, "It tastes like freedom." Her father placed his hand over hers. "Remember this day," he said. The day small miracles became larger than fear. Days at the refugee shelter blurred into routine. Meals under fluorescent lights, whispered conversations with strangers. For Amira, the noise no longer felt like a threat, but proof. Survival had many faces. Her first day at school came quickly. The hallways roared with chatter, lockers slamming, bells ringing. She clutched her diary like armor, trying to vanish at the back of the classroom. Whispers rose, eyes flicked toward her. Every laugh cut deep. By lunchtime, her chest was heavy. She stood with her tray, searching for a seat, but groups closed around themselves. She turned to leave when a soft voice stopped her. "Here." A girl with a braid patted the seat beside her. Her name was Lily. She smiled, small but genuine. Amira hesitated, then sat. Lily slid a granola bar across the table. "Trade?" she asked, pointing at Amira's apple. Amira blinked, then nodded quickly. The sweet smell of oats and honey rose as she bit, unfamiliar but comforting. Lily laughed softly at her expression, warm and unguarded. Something broke loose inside Amira, a small, fragile smile. For the first time that day, she felt seen. That night, she wrote in her diary, "Today I was a shadow, but someone saw me. She gave me a seat. She gave me food. She gave me my name back. Maybe tomorrow, the world will feel less strange." Weeks later, a knock came at the shelter door. The father opened it cautiously. Officer Daniel stood there, uniform crisp, eyes warm. Beside him was Rex. The shepherd filled the doorway like a living memory. His gaze swept the room before settling on the family. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then Karim moved. He bolted forward, crying out, "Rex!" The boy flung himself into the dog's neck, sobbing, "I missed you. You didn't let us die." Rex lowered his head into the boy's arms, exhaling warm breath against his cheek. His body stilled, yielding completely, as though the child's embrace was command enough. Their mother wept openly, hands pressed to her mouth. Their father bowed his head, words failing. Amira stepped closer, whispering, "He remembered. He came back." Daniel stood quietly, throat tight. He had seen Rex work countless times, but never like this, claimed utterly by a child's tears. Karim pressed his forehead against the shepherd's, whispering, "I won't forget. Ever." Rex's ear flicked, his eyes dark and steady, as though sealing the vow inside himself. In that small room, silence returned. Not the suffocating silence of steel walls, but the silence of awe. And as night spread across the city, the family felt none of their old fear. Because inside, they had Rex again. And Rex never forgot. Snow drifted softly outside the window, the street lamps casting golden halos over a neighborhood hushed in white. Inside the small apartment, warmth gathered around a wooden table where bowls of stew steamed and bread lay thickly sliced. It wasn't much, but to them, it was a feast. After the meal, their mother brought out a cardboard box given by the shelter. Inside lay a tangle of ornaments, glass balls chipped with age, paper angels bent at the wings, stars carved of wood. A small artificial tree stood in the corner, its branches sparse but upright. Karim's eyes widened as he lifted a red ornament, its paint flaking. "Look, Amira. It shines." She laughed softly as she hung it low on the branch. "It shines because we are here to see it." Piece by piece, the tree grew brighter, not from electricity, but from memory reclaimed. Their father lifted Karim high to place an angel near the top. Their mother draped a strand of tinsel as though weaving blessings into its needles. Finally, a cardboard star wrapped in gold foil crowned the tree. They stood shoulder to shoulder, gazing in silence. "This is our beginning," their mother whispered. Amira scribbled quickly in her diary before the moment could slip. "We have a tree. We have warmth. We have each other. Tonight, the snow falls, and for the first time in a long time, it falls on us as a family again." At the base of the tree, Rex stretched across the rug, his dark coat gleaming in lamplight. His steady eyes watched them, as if guarding the fragile hope taking root. Weeks later, a knock sounded at the door. Karim raced across the floor and flung it open. "Rex!" he cried. The shepherd padded inside, Daniel holding the leash loosely. Karim wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, laughing through tears. "You came back," he whispered, burying his face in the fur. Rex lowered his head fully into the boy's embrace, tail sweeping the floor. Amira moved closer, resting her hand on his back. "He remembered," she whispered. Daniel smiled quietly from the doorway, saying nothing. Amira picked up her diary again, writing slowly as Rex laid his head in her lap. "Today, Rex came again. Karim laughs when he is here. Mama smiles longer. Baba sits quieter. And I feel safe. For the first time, safe. For our family, America did not begin in grandeur, but in the warmth of survival, and in the loyalty of a dog who refused to let us be forgotten." She closed the book, stroking Rex's fur. Karim leaned against her, whispering with a smile, "He's ours now." "Yes," she answered softly, her eyes shining. "Ours." The tree glowed faintly in the corner. Outside, snow melted slowly into spring. Inside, around a battered diary and the steady breath of a shepherd, the family began again. Sometimes the most powerful reminders in life come from the quiet presence of a dog. German shepherds, especially, show us a kind of loyalty that doesn't ask for words, only trust. Their devotion carries us through fear, through silence, and into the comfort of knowing we're never truly alone. Stories like this remind us that love between people and animals isn't just companionship. It's healing, it's memory, it's family. If this touched you, you might enjoy exploring a resource I've found that helps people connect more deeply with their own dogs. It's nothing fancy, just something that offers gentle ways to understand them better and honor the bond we already feel. Take your time with it. Or simply sit with your dog tonight. Maybe whisper a thank you. Maybe share a quiet moment. That's often enough. And if you choose to look further, let it be because your heart feels the pull, not because anyone told you to. In the end, what matters most is this: they never forget us, and we shouldn't forget them either.